So why engage with these losers? It's probably the question that I get asked most of all. I mean, surely if you just ignore them, they'll go away, right? Well, put simply, no. No, they don't, and it really is this simple. If people with really stupid ideas just went away, then the most popular religion in the world wouldn't have this as its central dogma. There was a blood curse that was caused by when a dirt man and a rib woman became convinced by a talking snake to eat magical fruit, and that blood curse can only be lifted because the same God that invoked that blood curse in the first place made himself human and had himself executed in a fashion typically used to execute criminals of the time. And how that means that if you say magical incantations over bread and wine, that will transform this into that celestial zombie's flesh, and then if you eat the zombie's flesh and drink its blood, then that will lift the blood curse. The most popular religion in the world. So for instance, if you just ignore people like, say, Anita Sarkeesian, will she just go away? Or does that just mean that her bullshit arguments will go unchallenged? I mean, even as it stands, she just got an Ambassador's Award from a game developer conference. Or Sui Park, if you leave her unchallenged, will she go away or just keep giving her keynote speeches at mainstream American universities? Or Rebecca, it's sexist to ask someone out for coffee in an elevator, especially if you've hung out in a bar till 4 o'clock in the morning, Watson. Incidentally, if you don't think the progress can be made, it looks like even she has decided that the term feminism is far too toxic to use. I mean, she used to talk about feminism, and now she talks about lady stuff. Or Melody Hensley of Twitter gave me post-traumatic stress disorder, and if you're a combat troop and you don't believe that, then I'm going to report you to your commanding officer. Fame. Now, she's the executive director for the Centre for Inquiry. And just so you know, it turns out that both she and Rebecca Watson thought that they should be able to take over the running of the Centre for Inquiry. Yeah, if you ignore them, they're not just going to go away. The bottom line is, these people are professional parasites. They seek to get invited to conference. This is the thing that they do with their fake persecution. And then these untalented losers use that to try and convince people how important their opinions must be. Personally, I think that sunlight is the best sterilant here. That is, if left unchecked, bad ideas will happily spread. Indeed, in many cases, they will spread even if you try to stop them. So point in question, there are arguments like this pervasively thrown around as to why women are institutionally oppressed.
Because men occupy the top rungs of not just politics, but every industry in the world. Women only hold 1 in 4 STEM jobs. We own 6% of TV stations, 5% of executive positions in the media.
And they get a huge amount of attention for it. Well, if that's a valid argument, that must mean that the fact that 90% of the people in jail are men must mean that the entire criminal justice system is sexist against men, right? The bottom line is, though, it's not a valid argument. A lot of this is simply down to sexual dimorphism in humans. Oh, and boy, are those words, sexual dimorphism. They are like kryptonite to feminists. But someone who's really not thought about it that much, the argument does superficially seem to hold water. But unless someone's actually going to make the videos pointing out with hindsight what is bloody obvious, people who haven't thought about it that much are simply going to get blindsided by this sort of argument. Or another point in question, the Young Turks covered this story about a thorium-powered car about 6 months ago, and I knew it was utter bollocks, and so I made a video utterly debunking it, you know, as someone who works with ionizing radiation on a regular basis. And now, 6 months later, the story gets picked up by someone else who believes the original story and gets it trending on Yahoo. That these dumb and demonstrably wrong ideas will happily propagate in the wide world. It's sort of the celestial zombie flesh principle. The best you can do is try and get the informed information out there and to highlight why this stuff is bullshit. And that's what I strive to do here. And at this point, I would like to personally thank all of those who have supported this goal through Patreon. Now, I could go on at some length about just how grateful I am for this and just how many options this has put before this channel. But for the moment, I'm just going to confine myself to saying a sincere and an honest thank you. Now, for the longest time, I stood by the motto that a house divided against itself cannot stand. However, what's happened here is that these untalented grifters have worked out that real victims get instantly a lot of sympathy from society, and deservedly so. And they've therefore worked out that it's the simplest con ever to just pretend to be a victim. Oh, and boy, have they become experts in the art. Now, I watched for years as these parasites basically used their shaming tactics to get their own way, even when clearly most of the time it was just used in the service of their own personal advancement. And eventually I just came to the conclusion that as much truth as there is in the house divided against itself cannot stand, these blood-sucking parasites had got to the point where they were poisoning the community. And that the time had come to basically do something. And that's when I started the Why Feminism is Poisoning Atheism series. I then realized that this wasn't a unique disease to the secular and the atheist community. These parasites had attached themselves all over the place to for instance, the gaming community, and even while it was a thing, to the Occupy movement.
Remember the two-tier justice system, income inequality, and the banking and mortgage crisis? Maybe you do, but they didn't. The most pressing problem at Occupy in Vancouver, according to articles published by Sacha Wiley-Shaw, is, not surprisingly, misogyny and slut-shaming. Seriously.
The routine was always the same. I'm being victimized by these evil men. And when someone says, can we have some evidence of that, please? The answer would always be, I don't have to justify myself to my oppressors. Or only someone who hasn't checked their privilege could say that. Or you just don't want to correct the problem so you can keep having your male, cisgendered, privileged fun. Or you're just too white and male to have your opinion taken seriously. The one thing that was never forthcoming was actual evidence that there was a problem. And that point was really brought home when one Ellen Beth Wachs, who was once firmly on board with this victimhood narrative and was even once the top signature in a petition to have me lynched, that was until she had the temerity to question the threat narrative herself and was subsequently and vindictively excommunicated. She mournfully reflected afterwards that no evidence had ever been presented that sexual harassment was a significant problem at atheist conventions. And through all of this, they've managed to successfully muddy the waters such that if there are real cases of sexual harassment out there, people will take it less seriously because they've cried wolf so often over such trivial problems, or just cried wolf because they wanted the attention. But ultimately, these cults are never so vindictive as they are to ex-members who have questioned their dogma. The game is basically one of the emperor's new clothes. All of the social justice warriors claim and claim and claim that they're being oppressed. And when people call them on their histrionics, they use that as evidence that they were oppressed. Kind of like the creationists.
As I investigated this situation, I discovered Dr. Sternberg is far from alone. Many other scientists face similar persecution. They're losing their jobs, they can't get tenure, they're denied publication in scientific journals, and they're openly ridiculed and ostracized by their peers. It isn't just scientists attacking these guys either. The media's in on it, the courts, the educational system, everyone's after them.
Actually, more accurately, these people are more like Westboro Baptist Church, protesting religious persecution by spitting on the graves of soldiers killed in the line of duty. And when they get the entirely expected backlash, claiming that this is evidence of all the religious persecution there is out there. I mean, really, how is that any different from Melody Hensley threatening to report people to their commanding officers because they don't believe that she got post-traumatic stress disorder from Twitter, and when she gets the expected and deserved backlash, standing up and saying, just look at all this evidence of sexism. It's bullshit. And that's exactly what happens when Anita Sarkeesian, Rebecca Watson, Sue Park, Melody Hensley and the such like make claims like you can't understand this argument because of your skin colour and gender.
Especially as a white man, I don't expect you to be able to understand what people of color are actually saying.
And then they portray the deserved backlash as evidence of sexism. No, it's not. But this is just a hijacking, plain and simple. No, the gaming community shouldn't be about playing games. It should be about me talking how oppressed I am. Or no, the secular and atheist community shouldn't be about talking about secular and atheist things. It should be about me talking about how me getting hit on after I've been hanging out in the bar till 4 o'clock in the morning is sexist. History has shown us that if you ignore them, they don't just go away. And sometimes, if you're planning a long journey, it's worth cleaning the crap off your shoes before you start.